There appeared to be an established cycle of constantly returning to Earth again after being on the other side. It seemed to me that if someone were in a place where they could not die, that they would naturally want to remain there forever. I was thinking of the way people on Earth are always searching for immortality. No, you would be bored very quickly. If your lesson of the third grade is over, why would you want to stay in the third grade for the rest of your life? It could be comfortable, but there would be no learning. There would be no challenges. That's true. Death is necessary in order to progress. Stagnation would occur if there were no death in order to move one to the spirit side. This is an ongoing process, which is best suited for the learning of much information. All is as it should be in this respect. If the lessons you were learning were finished, then there would be a casting off of the experiences which taught those lessons, and an assuming of new experiences to learn the more advanced lessons. It is simply climbing ladders, if you will, where each level of experience is growing in awareness from the one below it. Chapter 1. The Death Experience. I have been accused of speaking to and communicating with the spirits of the dead, a definite no-no in religious circles. I had never thought of it in just that way, but I suppose it is true. With the exception that the dead with whom I speak are no longer dead, but are living again today and going about their daily lives. For, as you see, I am a regressionist. This is a popular term for a hypnotist that specializes in past life regressions and historical research. Many people still have difficulty accepting the idea that I am able to go back through time and talk to people as they relive other lives down through history. I soon became accustomed to this and found it fascinating. I have written books describing some of my adventures in this incredible field. With most hypnotists, past life work is strictly off limits. I don't really understand why, unless they are afraid of what they might find and would rather stick with known and familiar situations which they are positive they can handle. One such therapist confided in me, as though he had made a real breakthrough. I have tried some regressions. I once took someone back to when he was a baby. He was so serious, it was almost impossible for me to suppress a laugh as I answered, "Oh?" That is where I begin. Even among other regressionists who work regularly with past life memories as therapy, I have found many who have their own fears about taking a hypnotized subject through the death experience or venturing into the periods between lives when a person is supposedly dead. They are afraid something physical might actually happen to the living body of the subject in trance, that somehow they may be harmed by the reliving of these memories, especially if they are traumatic. After going through this experience with thousands of subjects, I know that there are no physical problems, even if the regressed personality died in a horrible way. Of course, I always take special precautions to ensure that there will be no physical effects. The welfare of my subject is always my most immediate concern. I feel that my technique completely safeguards the subject. I would not attempt this type of research otherwise. To me, the in-between life plane, the so-called dead state, is the most exciting sphere of existence I have encountered, because I believe there is much information to be obtained there that can be of great benefit to humankind. I believe people can come to realize that death is nothing to fear. When they face that time in their life, they can see that it is not a new experience, but one they are well acquainted with. They, themselves, have already performed it many times. They will not go into the great terrifying unknown, but to a familiar place they have already visited many, many times. A place that many call home. I hope people can learn to see birth and dying as evolutional cycles that each person goes through many times, and are thus a natural part of their soul's growth. After death, there is life and existence in the other planes that is just as real as the physical world they see around them. It may be even more real. Once, while talking to a woman who considered herself enlightened, I was trying to explain some of the things I have found. I told her I did research into what it was like to die and where you go afterwards. She asked excitedly, "Where do you go? Heaven, hell, or purgatory?" I was disappointed. If those were the only choices her mind would accept, it was obvious the woman was not as enlightened as she thought. Exasperated, I replied, "Neither." She was shocked. "You mean to stay in the dirt?" Thus I realized that in order to write this book, I must retrace my steps to where I stood when the door first opened, and I tried to remember my beliefs and thoughts as they were before the light entered. No easy task, but necessary if I am to understand and relate to those still searching for that door and that light. For I must speak to them in terms they can understand, and try to lead them gently down the path of awareness. Then they can live their lives to the fullest without fear of what tomorrow brings. To many people, the word death seems so forbidding, so final, so hopeless. A black void of mystery and confusion because it represents a cutting off from the physical world, which is the only place they definitely know with certainty exists. Like many things in life, death is unknown, shrouded in mystery, folklore, and superstition, and thus to be feared. Yet it is something that we know everyone must eventually experience. No matter how much we wish to push it to the back of our minds and not think about it, we know that the body is only mortal and will someday expire. What happens then? Will the personality that we consider to be ourselves also perish with the physical shell? Is this life all there is? Or is there something more, something rare and beautiful beyond what we know as life? Maybe the churches are correct when they preach about heaven for the good and pious and hell for the evil and damned. With my insatiable curiosity, I am always searching for answers, and I believe there are many others who also share this craving to know. It would make life so much easier if we could live out our time in happiness and love, not fearing what lies at the end. When I first began my regression research, I had no idea I would find the answers to any of these questions. Being a history enthusiast, I mostly enjoyed going back through time and talking to people in different eras. I enjoyed reliving history as it was being made, and as it was seen through their eyes as they remembered their other lives. I wanted to write books about their versions of these historical periods, because each unknowingly corroborated the other's stories while in deep trance. There are patterns I did not expect to find, but then something unexpected occurred that opened up a whole new world for me to explore. I discovered the period between lives, the so-called dead state, the place where people went after they left a physical life here on earth. I can still remember the first time I stumbled through the door and spoke to the dead. It was during a past life regression, and when the subject died on me, it happened so quickly and spontaneously that I was taken off guard. I was not fully aware of what had happened. I don't know what I expected would occur if someone were to go through a death experience. But as I said, it happened so quickly, there was no time to stop it. The person was looking down at their body and saying that they looked just like any other corpse. I was amazed that the personality had definitely remained intact. It had not changed. This is important. This is a fear that some people have, that somehow the experience of dying will transform them or their loved ones into something different, strange, or unrecognizable. Again, it is the fear of the unknown. Why else are we so afraid of ghosts and spirits? We think that somehow the process of crossing over will change them from the beloved person we knew into something evil and frightening. But I have discovered that the personality remains the same. Although on some occasions it experiences momentary confusion, it is still basically the same person. When I overcame my shock and wonder of being able to speak with someone after they had died, my curiosity took over, and I was filled with questions I had always wondered about. From that time forward, each time I found a subject who could go into the deeper states of hypnosis required for this type of research, I made a practice of asking some of the same questions. Religious beliefs, or lack thereof, seemed to have no influence on what they reported. Their answers were basically identical each time. Although worded differently, they were all saying the same thing, a phenomenon in itself. Since I began my work in 1979, I have had hundreds and hundreds of people go through the death experience, They have died in every conceivable manner: accidents, shooting, stabbing, fire, hanging, decapitation, drowning, and even in one case by death in an atomic explosion, which I reported in my book, A Soul Remembers Hiroshima. They have also died naturally from heart attacks, disease, old age, and peacefully in their sleep. Although there has been a great deal of diversity, there have also been definite patterns that have emerged. The manner of death may be different, but what happens afterward is always the same. Thus, I have come to the conclusion that there is really no reason to fear death. We subconsciously know what happens and what lies over there. We should. We have had so much practice at it. We have all gone through it countless times before. So, in my study of death, I have found the celebration of life. It is far from being a morbid subject, but a most fascinating other world. With death also comes wisdom. Something happens with the shedding of the physical body, and a whole new dimension of knowledge opens up. Apparently, the human being is limited and hampered by being in the physical. The personality or spirit that continues on is not hindered in this way, and can perceive so much more than we can even imagine. Thus, when I talked to these people after they had died, I was able to obtain the answers to many puzzling and perplexing questions that have haunted humankind since the beginning of time. What the spirit reported depended upon the personal spiritual growth of that spirit. Some had more knowledge than others and were able to express it clearer in terms that were easier for us mortals to grasp. I will attempt to describe what they experienced by letting them speak for themselves. This book is a compilation of what many people reported. The most common descriptions I have found of the moment when death occurs is that there is a feeling of coldness, and then suddenly the spirit is standing by the side of the bed, or wherever, looking at their body. They usually can't understand why the other people in the room are so upset, because they feel so wonderful. The overall sensation is one of exhilaration rather than dread. The following is a description of the moment of release by a woman in her 80s who was dying of old age. It is an example that is typical and constantly repeated. You have lived a long time, didn't you? Yes. I move slow. It takes so long. There's not much joy anymore. I am so tired. Since she was obviously experiencing discomfort, I moved her ahead in time until the death was over. When I finished counting, the subject's entire body jerked on the bed, and she suddenly smiled. Her voice was full of life, nothing that even resembled the weary tones of only a moment before. I feel free. I'm light. She sounded so pleased. Can you see the body? Oh, that old thing. It's down there. Oh, I had no idea I looked so bad. I was so wrinkled and shriveled. I feel too good to be that shriveled. It was all wore out. Oh, I'm so glad I'm here. I could hardly keep from laughing. Her expression and tone of voice was quite a contrast. No wonder it was shriveled. That body lived many years. That's probably why it died. You said you are here. Where are you? I'm in the light, and oh, it feels so good. I feel intelligent. I feel peace. I feel calm. I don't need anything. What are you going to do now? They tell me I've got to go and rest. Oh, I hate to rest when I've got so much to do. Do you have to rest if you don't want to? No, but I don't feel like I want to be cramped again. I want to grow and learn. After this, I was unable to get any more answers from her except that she was floating. I could tell by her expression and her breathing that she was in the resting place. When a subject goes there, it is as if they have drifted into a deep sleep and they don't want to be disturbed. It is useless to try to question them because their answers will be incoherent. This special place will be explained in further detail later in the book. In another case, a woman was reliving the birth of a baby at home. Her breathing and bodily movements showed that she was experiencing the physical symptoms of childbirth. This often occurs when the body remembers as well as the mind. In order not to cause the subject discomfort, I moved her ahead in time to where the birth should have been over. Did you have the baby? No, I had a difficult time. It just wouldn't come. I was wore out. so I just left my body. Do you know what the baby was? No, it doesn't make any difference. Can you see your body? Yes, everybody's upset. What are you going to do now? I think I'm going to rest. I've got to come back eventually. But I'm going to stay here a while. I'm in the light, and it's restful. Can you tell me where the light is? Where all knowledge and everything is known. Everything is pure and simple. There is more pure truth here. You don't have the things of the world to confuse you. You have the truth on earth, but you just don't see it. But you said you have to come back sometime. How do you know that? I was weak. I should have been able to tolerate the pain. I must learn to better withstand it. I could have stayed if I hadn't been so weak. I'm glad I can't remember the pain. I know I need to go back, and I must become complete, whole. Pain is one thing I must overcome. I must overcome all the pains of the world. But experiencing pain is very human, and it's always difficult to do when you're in the body. From the side you're on now, it's easier to look at it in a different way. Do you think that's a lesson you want to learn? I will, yes. It takes me a while sometimes, but I can do anything. I think I should have been stronger. I would have done better, but I think I had a lot of fear from the illness I had when I was a child. I was afraid that this would be as bad, and I gave up. Pain, when you deal with the higher conscious level of your mind and remove yourself to the pure light and the pure thought, the pain ceases to be. Pain is only a lesson. When we learn about pain on the human level, we get frantic and show outward concern for just the moment. By removing ourselves and concentrating and reaching deep and having patience, we can rise above it. Does pain have a purpose? Pain is a teaching tool. Sometimes it is used to humble certain people. Sometimes a haughty spirit can be brought down and taught to be more gracious through suffering. It may teach them that they must eventually learn to rise above the pain, and then they can deal with it. Sometimes just understanding pain and why we have it lessens the pain. But like you said, people become frantic and they think they can't handle it. They become too self-centered. They need to rise above their own interests and what they're feeling at the moment to a more spiritual level, and then they can deal with it. Now, some people, they bring the pain on because it's a shelter. They may have the pain as an excuse or as an out, and that's the purpose. It varies with the individual. What is pain? It can't touch you if you don't let it. If you admit that you will hurt, you're giving power to pain. Do not give it power. It's unnecessary to feel it. It's all connected to man. Reach into your spirit, your higher mind. It has no hold on you. People separate themselves from pain? Of course, if they want to. They don't always want to. They want the sympathy and self-punishment and all sorts of things. People are funny. Everyone knows how to do these things if they take the time. They must find a way for themselves because they wouldn't believe it if you told them there was an easier way. They have to figure it out on their own. That's part of the lessons that get you there. People are so afraid of dying. Can you tell me what it's like when it happens? Well, when I'm in the body, it feels heavy. It pulls on me. It's just uncomfortable. But when you die, it's a lifting of weight. It's relaxing. People carry all those problems around, and it's like they are carrying around a weight because they are heavy and laden with all these other things. When you die, it's like tossing them out the window, and it feels good. It's a transition. I guess people are mostly afraid because they don't know what to expect. They fear the unknown. They must just have faith and just trust. What happens when somebody dies? You rise up and leave it. You go up here, in the light. What do you do when you're there? Perfect all things. Where do you go if you have to go away from the light? Back to earth? Is it unusual for us to speak to you through time like this? But time has no meaning. On this frame there is no time. All time is one. Then it doesn't bother you that we speak to you from another time or plane? Why should it? Well, we thought it might, and I didn't want to disturb you. I find that it disturbs you more than it does me. In one regression, a young woman was being burned at the stake for her beliefs while the whole town watched. She was terrified, but was also very angry at the bigoted people who were responsible for this. As the flames leaped higher, she decided she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her suffer. So she left the body and watched from a hovering position above the scene. There, much to her chagrin and aggravation, she saw her body screaming as it went through the agonies of burning to death. In this case, it was very obvious that the body and the spirit were two separate things. I think it would be very reassuring and comforting to people who have lost loved ones in a violent, horrible way to know that they probably did not even experience the most traumatic part of the death. It makes a great deal of sense to realize that the spirit would not want to remain in the body and experience all that pain. Therefore, the spirit removes itself, and the body is merely reacting spontaneously. Much in the same way that we react when we cut or burn ourselves accidentally. We yell and pull our hand away. This is not a conscious reaction, but an involuntary one. Thus, it would appear that during a horrible death, the body is merely reacting, while the real personality has vacated and is watching from the sidelines. Another description of death. Imagine yourself naked, cold, and bleeding, walking through the dark woods full of briars and wild animals and strange noises. You know that behind every bush is a beast ready to pounce and tear you apart. And then suddenly you walk into a clearing where there is grass growing, and birds singing, clouds in the sky, and a pleasant laughing brook that meanders on its way to its destination. Imagine the difference in these scenarios, and you can see my analogy portraying what you would call life and death. But there are many people on earth who are afraid of it. Many people who are in the forest are afraid. That is correct. Once they are out of the forest, there is no fear. The fear is in the forest. Then there is nothing to be afraid of in the transition? There are some transitions which are more desirable than others. I will not mince words on this. However, a door is merely a door. No matter how many times you open it, it simply will not change from being a door. Another description. People should not be afraid of dying. Death is no more to be feared than breathing. Dying is as natural and as painless as blinking your eyes. And that's almost the way it is. At one moment you're in one plane of existence, and you blink your eyes, so to speak, and you're in another plane of existence. That's about the physical sensation you have, and it's as painless as that. Any pain you feel in the process is from physical damage, but spiritually there is no pain. Your memories are intact, and you feel the same, as if your life is continuing. Sometimes it takes you a little bit to notice that you're no longer connected to your physical body, but usually that is noticed right away because your perceptions are broadened to where you can perceive the spiritual plane without the veil in the way. This is the clouded mirror, as some have likened it to. What happens is that at first there is a period of orientation. You are still very conscious of the physical plane, but you are exploring and absorbing the sensations of being aware of the spiritual plane, until you get used to the fact that you're really on the spiritual plane, and you are comfortable with it. Can you tell me, does your spirit include your soul when it leaves your body? Your spirit is your soul. The soul concept encompasses that energy which you would call your spirit, your identity, your reality. That is indeed your true self. You may call it your spirit or your soul, depending on which perception you would choose to integrate into your reality. We've heard a lot about what is called the silver cord. Is there any such thing? This is, as you might perceive it, a lifeline to your body, which is very real in nature. In an energetic sense, this is the cord which maintains a lifeline with your energies to your body. It is indeed a real device. Then at the point of death, this cord is severed? That is accurate. Some people are afraid to have out-of-body experiences for fear that they might become separated from their body prematurely. It is possible to do this. However, it is almost certainly done intentionally and not through accident. You mean when they go out of the body, the silver cord connects them so they can't become lost, so to speak? That is accurate. There should be no fear in experiencing astral travel, for were it not meant to happen, it would never happen. But in many cases, it is not planned, it is spontaneous. That is accurate. It is spontaneous. In my work, I have discovered that most people are not aware that everyone travels out of the body every night when they go to sleep. The body is the part that gets tired and must rest. The spirit or soul never requires sleep. It would be awfully boring for the real you, the spirit, to wait around for the body to wake up so it could continue its work. So while the body is sleeping, the real you is going off and having all kinds of adventures. It can travel all over the earth, spend time on the spirit side, and even go to other planets or dimensions. The person is normally not aware of this unless they remember dreams of flying or unusual places. You are always connected to your body by the silver cord, your lifeline, your umbilical. And when it is time to return to the body, you are more or less reeled in, and the spirit re-enters the body. I have been told by my clients that they sometimes experience temporary paralysis just before awakening. This occurs when the person is awakened suddenly, by a loud noise, etc., before the spirit is totally back in the body. The body-spirit connections have not been completed, and temporary paralysis is the result. It usually passes quickly and is nothing to be feared. Is there any danger of someone staying out of the body? We perceive there is no danger, for were the individual not to return, it would be of his or her own choosing, and not because some malevolent energy has come in behind and severed the cord. They couldn't become lost, in other words, and not find their way back? We do not perceive this as true. Then they are definitely connected with the body until the point of death, and then the cord is severed? It is like an umbilical, so to speak. That is entirely accurate. If death would occur during an out-of-body experience, what would we say the body died of? Would it be a heart attack? You are asking what the physical symptoms would be. Sudden infant syndrome is often ascribed to this. There are also those who, because of age, simply choose not to return, and so they are found in their sleep. Is it a heart attack? That is not the case, because a heart attack is death induced by a real physical ailment, and is not what we refer to here. They would die in their sleep, and it would be called from natural causes. If an autopsy were performed, they wouldn't find any cause at all. That is accurate. What about people who seem to die of spontaneous combustion? That is an unexplained mystery. This is due to an imbalance of what you would call chemicals within the system. It is because of the fact that human bodies do burn food, though through a very controlled and very slow process. Such a death is caused by the combustion of the body fluids. This is oftentimes due to hereditary factors which cause an imbalance in the chemical makeup of the body. For example, too much phosphorus in the body system. When people are on the spirit side, they make a plan before they re-enter the karmic wheel called Earth. It is a plan of what they hope to accomplish during the next life. They also make contracts with other souls that are going to be important for them to interact with during the upcoming lifetime. Also, a part of this contract is their exit plan. Everyone plans the way they will leave or exit this present lifetime. I have found that no one ever dies until it is their time to die. There are no such things as accidents. It was just the manner chosen for the soul to exit. When the soul has completed what it came to accomplish, it is time to move to the next phase of their existence. I have found that it is possible to delay the death for a short period of time. However, when it is the appointed time, the spirit chooses to leave. Of course, the conscious mind of the person has no memory of this part of the plan, because when we come into this life, the veil of forgetfulness comes down and all memory of the spirit side is removed. They said one time, it would not be a test if you knew the answers. So we have to remain consciously oblivious to our soul plans. What about people who seem to die in groups? There are many cases such as train accidents, massacres, earthquakes, where several people die at one time. Did they all choose to go at the same time, or did they have anything to say about it? You are aware of the concept of karma on an individual basis. There is indeed also what is called group karma. There have been, through many eons of time, instances where souls have tended to group together to perform certain tasks, or to establish changes, or to experience life in a group, much as you tend to experience on an individual basis. These group deaths are nothing more than individual souls who would come together at some certain points in their transition, that is, in their learning experience of dying, and in so doing find themselves at a juncture at which it would be most appropriate for them to depart simultaneously. Did they agree to do this before their entry into the life? That is accurate, for it is in this group transition that they find support. There is a sharing of the experience in that they are not alone in this transition. In many cases, there have been multiple births and lives shared, so it is not uncommon to find multiple or shared deaths. Was this the case with the astronauts who passed over in the Challenger spaceship accident? Indeed, this was one instance in which it was agreed that there would be that sharing of the death experience. But there was so much suffering for the families and people all over the country when this happened. If they were going to their destiny, why can't we be happy about it? Perhaps there is a short-sightedness in seeing these events. You are thinking only of the individuals who departed. This is not the case. There are many other elements involved. In cases like this, there was a coming together of the survivors, a sharing of the experience. In seeing that someone else is sharing the grief, it is much easier for an individual to experience this, knowing that there are others who are going through the same thing. Thus, this was a group experience on many levels. Many subjects describe the experience after leaving the physical body as journeying toward a bright, dazzling light at the end of a tunnel, or whatever. These descriptions have been duplicated in reports of NDES, near-death experiences. One of my subjects said that this white light was an intense energy field that served as the barrier between our physical world and the spiritual realm. In NDES, the person will approach the light but are pulled back into their body before entering it. They have actually been in a near-death situation, but they did not complete the transition. They did not go far enough. When my subjects have relived the death experience, they pass through the white light, the barrier. At that point, the energy is so intense that it severs the silver cord, the umbilical that attaches the spirit to the physical body. When this occurs, the spirit cannot cross back through the barrier and enter their body again. The two have been forever separated. Without this connection to its life force, the soul or spirit, the body quickly begins to deteriorate. Chapter 2. The Greeters. After dying, there seems to be a period of confusion for some spirits. All do not experience this. Much of it depends upon the manner of death, whether it was natural or sudden and unexpected. The main thing that I found is the assurance that one is never alone after going through the death experience. There's sometimes a period when you're not really sure where you are, whether you're on the physical plane or the spiritual plane, because some of the sensations are similar, yet they're different. And you're trying to figure out what is going on and where you are. There is a period of orientation or reorientation, which can be confusing to some as they figure out where they should go from here. But they needn't worry, because help is sent immediately. Usually a handful of souls will come that you have had close karmic connections with in former lifetimes. There's always one or two, or even more on hand that are in between incarnations themselves. They will be there to greet you, and the person will recognize them due to his connection with them in the immediate past lifetime. Another thing that causes confusion when you cross over to the spiritual planes is that your memory starts opening up to your past incarnations and your entire karmic picture. So you'll recognize those souls. First, initially in the relationship you knew them in the life you just left. Then you'll start remembering other relationships where you've known them. That's part of the process of remembering all of your karma while you're on that plane, so you can understand what you just completed and what you still need to work out when you return to Earth again. Then it's true that someone always comes when people die? Yes. If possible, it's usually someone who was special to them during their life, if they have not reincarnated. Someone that they can identify with, and the power of attraction is there to help them through the period of transition. But many times people die violently or suddenly. If they don't know they are dead, are they more apt to be confused? Yes, that is true. And the helper who is there has to explain to them what is going on, and to help them through it. When the spirit is met by other souls after it has died, where does it usually go? It goes to the plane where the learning takes place. There's no central location for it. It's just a state of being. And usually the spirit interacts with many other souls while it is doing this. After learning what it needs for its next lifetime, it consults with the spiritual masters and starts preparing for its next incarnation. It consults with the spiritual masters to see what kind of situation would be best for the spirit to come back into. There is also consultation about which souls would be best for it to interact with for the benefit of all. Have you ever heard of the resting place? Yes, if you are referring to what I am picturing, it is a special place for damaged souls or those who have died traumatically to go to rest and restore themselves before they can enter the company of other souls or enter the plane of incarnation again. Some people believe that the form of Jesus' spirit will contact you to guide you at the time that your spirit leaves your body. It is entirely possible, however, not mandatory or in all cases. It is sometimes done if the individual crossing over requests or desires to see this Jesus energy, and so it is in fact the Jesus energy which would manifest itself. For he has so stated that his help shall be a part of this process, and it is there for any who would so choose to open themselves up to this energy, be they incarnate or not. This is also true for people of other beliefs or religions. If they have a deep abiding belief in a particular entity, that spirit energy will be there for them to help ease the crossing, if this is what they desire. There is also the belief that there is a place in the spirit world where spirits sleep because they die believing that they have to rest until Jesus comes the second time and resurrects them. That which you expect to find, or that reality you create, you do indeed find. Were they to expect to awaken into perhaps a carnival, then that would be what they would find. Anything is possible if they believe in it. There are so many different things that can happen after the death of what you would term the physical body. When a body expires, the soul never does. If it is a gentle death, then there is a feeling of relief, of wonder, of freedom. For the most part, what the person expects to be there will be there. If they expect to meet guides or friends along the way to help them toward the light, this is what they shall see. If they were steeped in the belief of damnation and hellfire, and if they believe that they deserve this, this is what they shall also perceive. Most of this is based upon the preparation of the individual soul prior to death. But usually, there are those who were close to them before they passed over to the other side. More times than not, another soul will come and guide them to a place of healing, so they will lose their confusion and understand what has occurred. Perhaps the spirit is confused because it's been a long time since they've been to this side. The greeters will help them become unconfused and find where they want to go and need to go. In this way, if it is someone they have known, then they have no fear, for fear is what causes people to be in shock. Some people, if it is a traumatic death, go into a period of deep, deep resting until they can handle the experience of knowing that their body has ceased to exist. And the awakening will be very slow. We don't need people who are wandering around in a daze. They can cause themselves harm and others also. Do they do that sometimes? It has not been unknown to happen, yes. They don't know where they are. In their panic, they can hurt themselves by feeling, I've got to get back, I've got to get back. And they tie themselves to wherever they died by the feeling that this can't be happening. It is better if they go and rest? Yes, because then they can be awakened slowly, knowing that what has happened is good, and it is right and natural. The shock and trauma have been lost then. Do their loved ones come when there is a traumatic death also? Yes, sometimes they just take them to a place where they can rest. But something that you would think of as a traumatic death would not always be considered traumatic on this side. You would perhaps consider many soldiers to have died traumatic deaths, yet sometimes they are some of the most accepting of what has happened, more so than perhaps someone who died in childbirth. I suppose it depends on the circumstances and the individual soul. Yes, to a great extent. There appeared to be an established cycle of constantly returning to Earth again after being on the other side. It seemed to me that if someone were in a place where they could not die, that they would naturally want to remain there forever. I was thinking of the way people on Earth are always searching for immortality. No, you would be bored very quickly. If your lesson of the 3rd grade is over, why would you want to stay in the 3rd grade for the rest of your life? It could be comfortable, but there would be no learning. There would be no challenges. That's true. Death is necessary in order to progress. Stagnation would occur if there were no death in order to move one to the spirit side. This is an ongoing process, which is best suited for the learning of much information. All is as it should be in this respect. If the lessons you were learning were finished, then there would be a casting off of the experiences which taught those lessons, and an assuming of new experiences to learn the more advanced lessons. It is simply climbing ladders, if you will, where each level of experience is growing in awareness from the one below it. So the surroundings, which will be the catalyst for these experiences, will be discarded as the new experiences are needed. Would you like to stay in your 3rd grade classroom and take 4th or 6th grade classes? Or would it be better to be in a new environment and start with a new frame of mind? If you were left in the same classroom, you would tend to think the same. The frame of mind is very important also. I think that's true of many people on Earth. Sometimes if they stay in the same environment, they don't grow. Is that what you mean? That is exactly correct. They need the challenge of something new, a new place, new surroundings. New surroundings are very important to progression. Reminders of the past inhibit looking to the future. Some people think that there is no life after death. But once something exists, the energy which is that existence cannot be destroyed. Why is it so hard to believe that there is existence after the death of a physical body? You cannot destroy something like electricity because the energy is always there, although in a different form. Why do you think that a human spirit and soul can be destroyed when energy cannot? That is what the human soul is, nothing but energy. For the soul is not merely a thing which is residing within the physical body. It is an energy, and as an energy, it can propagate as energies want to do. The correct perception of your personality would be as energy, for that is the essence of the truth of creation, that all is energy. Some forms are on lower levels, such as the physical world around you, but they are energy and can be demonstrated as such by simple conversion processes, such as fire. All matter is in reality energy. It is simply manifested in a lower, baser form. And so you can see yourselves as pure beings of energy, nothing more, nothing less. There is no such thing as matter. This is simply a connotation which has been given to describe that which is apparent around the physical world. Death holds many fears. However, death is the great denier, the great untruth. It is that which is most unspoken about, but yet most thought about. There is no need to fear death, for with its release there is again life which far exceeds that which is here on this planet. However, to those who would deny this life, we would caution that by improper use, that is, by suicide or of that nature, one generates that energy which follows to the other side, and it is then necessary to be dealt with on the other side. It is, and never will be, appropriate to cast off a living body before its time. That is a waste which is not to be tolerated. I'm trying to make all this clear so people won't be so afraid of these things. Yes, the main problem you will have is not fear, but philosophical dogma in the way. Do you mean in the way of explaining it? Philosophical dogma is the way people have of closing off their minds to what is. For example, people who follow different creeds of belief will find it difficult to comprehend some of the things that I have explained. You mean those who are brought up in the belief of things like heaven and hell? For example, yes. And the ones that are brought up in the belief that each soul has only one incarnation. That is foolish, but that is what they believe. Yes, they think life is one time around and that's it. There are those who cannot accept the idea that they have lived more than once. Is it any harder to believe that you can be born once into a body than to believe you can be born twice or more? Some people have a hard time with the concept. Only those on your side. That is one reason why so many of them have problems with depression and such, because they feel they're screwing up their only chance. If they realize that they have a multitude of chances, they could do their best each time and not feel bad for the mistakes they make. They can work it out the next time. They should just try to do the best they can this time around. It makes sense to me, but there are many people who don't understand it. There are many who do not want to. Many have fear of thinking of another existence after the one they are living, because perhaps the one they are living is so painful that they think it would be continuous torture to have one life after another. Many of the churches do not want people to believe in prior or successive existences because of the fact that it loosens their grip of fear and they no longer have control. The leaders of all the great schools of thought knew of previous existence and successive existence, but it was closed off to the general knowledge because of control. Even the Hindu school of thought uses this control in a different manner because they say that this man has done something in his previous existence to make him suffer now. Therefore, why should I help him? He has done something to deserve this. In this way, they're using the same tactics as Christianity or any of the others. You have to remember that not all of those who say they are on the side of religion are. They perhaps are being warped by the darker side of things without themselves knowing it. Men have removed many things from the Bible and added what they wished. They have no cares. They think that this is what I wish it to say, and therefore that is what it says. People seem to have fear when something like this is brought up, when you try to tell them that the Bible has been changed many times throughout history. These things cause them to think, and many people are afraid of free thinking. When you take away what people have believed in all of their life and say that it is different, or that perhaps their parents unknowingly lied to them, you are taking away their foundations of what they believe in. And man cannot survive without something to believe in, even if it is the belief that there is nothing. He must believe in something. In other words, they are frightened by a different school of thought. People said the same things of Jesus when he said that he came to fulfill prophecies. They said that he was wrong, that he was crazy, that he didn't know what he was talking about. Every time someone comes up with something that's a little bit different or a little unusual, it's going to frighten people and they're going to say bad things about it. This knowledge is something that needs to be taught because man has to learn to be without fear in order to be what he can be. There are people who need to know these things, and it will strike a spark in them and they will recognize it as being the truth. It will perhaps help them find their way to become what they want to and need to become. They are the ones that are important because they will eventually bring enough people onto their side. Remember, there were only a few, a handful of people who believed in the message of Jesus. And now look at the world. Much of the world professes, at least outwardly, Christianity. The truth has been suppressed for many centuries, and it is time for it to come out. Chapter 3. A Near-Death Experience. Not all of my information about the death experience has come from hypnosis. Occasionally, people tell me about near-death experiences, NDEs, which they have had. This term was made popular by the work of Dr. Raymond Moody and Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It refers to events people remember when they have literally died and crossed the threshold to the other side. and have been brought back to our world of the living by the advances of science. The stories that people have recounted to me traditionally follow the pattern that other researchers have discovered. They also parallel the information I have found in my work, with the exception that those people have come back to report their experience, whereas mine remained on the spirit plane until they were reincarnated into their present life. My subjects carry the memory, but it is buried deep within their subconscious and can only be released by the use of regressive hypnosis. The case I will report carries many of the classical portions. A friend introduced me to Meg by saying that she had a remarkable story to tell me. Meg had not confided this experience to very many people because she was afraid of ridicule. It was too personal and private, and she felt that there were many who would never understand the importance she placed upon it. She felt it had changed her life forever. Meg was not the same after it, nor would she ever be the same. She believed this was the reason she was allowed to retain the memory. It was a gift she could draw upon in times of indecision and stress. She explained that hypnosis would not be necessary to recover the memory from her subconscious because it had been forever emblazoned in her mind. Meg may have been hazy about some of the details, but she knew she would never forget it, and no one would ever be able to convince her it had not occurred. It was a turning point in her life. Meg was a mature woman in her late 40s, married with several children. She had not read anything about NDEs, and she definitely had not been exposed to my material. She led an active life with many interests, but everything that had happened since the event had hinged upon its importance. It continued to color everything in her life. We met at a friend's house where we could have privacy, and Meg settled into a comfortable chair to relate her story for the tape recorder. I was impressed by her need for accuracy and the careful way she avoided embellishment of any kind. She felt the need to recite it correctly, and she remembered it in remarkable detail. Meg agreed to allow me to print the story on the condition that I keep her anonymous. This is what occurred, in her own words. It happened when I had surgery about 10 years ago in 1978. I was due to open a bookstore in June, but accidentally in a routine examination, they found a lesion on my lung. They couldn't decide whether it was cancerous or benign, so I had to have lung surgery. I must say that before going in, I intuitively did not feel like I had a cancer, and I didn't feel too good about this surgery. I didn't have good vibrations about it. That's the only way I can describe it. I had gone through a rather conventional childhood. I went to several different churches, and then no churches at all. They were every type: Congregational, Lutheran, etc. When we moved out to the country, I went with my next-door neighbor to the Baptist church, but I was not raised with a fundamentalist background. In fact, it was a very loose Christian background, loose in that I wasn't accustomed to going to church an awful lot. When I married my husband, I joined his church, which was an Episcopal church. Again, it was a very loose relationship, and remains that today. Somewhere along the line, I'd come to the conclusion that I certainly was at the point of being an agnostic, perhaps even an atheist. But I think because of my childhood habits, I didn't dare quite become a total atheist, just in case. I want you to know where I'm coming from as I lay in the hospital the night before the surgery. I really was convinced I might not come out of this. I said what I thought might possibly be my last prayer. I whispered into what I would call the darkness. I don't know if you're there, but if you are, this is the best I can do. And I tried to review everything and to see if spiritually I had left anything undone. Then I said, I don't really think you're there, but if you are, I really need some help. I went right to the wall. I'm sorry I can't have more faith, but in all honesty, this is the best, in the final analysis, that I can do. So anyhow, I came through the surgery fine, but I felt like hell because I hurt. I was hurting so bad, all I could think of was, when is the next shot? I'm putting this all in because I think I have to be honest, I was drifting in and out, and I was being given Demerol. So for the skeptics, they can say, well, she was on painkillers. It doesn't matter. The skeptics are going to say what they're going to say anyway. About the third day in intensive care, I fell asleep, and suddenly I was going down a very long, dark canyon. I felt very, very warm and very, very secure, but it was the blackest canyon I've ever seen. They were like mountain walls that seemed quite far away, and then suddenly they seemed close. At one point, I looked on these mountain walls, and instead of being all black, they almost appeared orange with dark, flickering lights against them. It had something to do with souls, but I don't remember what it was. But it was a very warm, secure feeling. As I was going down the canyon, I saw a very misty place just ahead of me. As I came upon it, I could see that there was some kind of a rock barrier blocking the entire entrance to this canyon. You couldn't go on, but there was just enough room to squeeze around it. There was mist everywhere. And then I saw the people standing there. There were 2 men and another shadowy figure. All of a sudden, I recognized who that person was. And then he was no longer a shadowy figure. This is funny, but he looked like Gene Wilder used to look in Willy Wonka. He had that wonderful curly hair and was wearing a suit with white piping. My first thought was, what is this? And then all of a sudden I realized I was dying. I did experience a moment of fear there. Then this man in this suit said, "You are at death." Those were the words. You are at death. Then I realized that he was the angel of death. He didn't say it, but I knew it. And I thought to myself he was a little intimidating. But when he said, "You are at death," it was so kind that I was not afraid. I was just not afraid at all. He was so kind, and he was so efficient. It was incredible. And I remember pondering it, then nodding my head and saying, I know. Now I'm going to say all the rest of this in a jumble because I was getting information simultaneously. It was just coming in from impressions. Where someone said something, I will quote exactly what they said. My first thought was, there really is something after death. There really is. I was absolutely astounded. I kept saying, but death is so easy. It's so easy. It's like getting up out of this chair and sitting down in that chair. These men were nodding their heads, and one of them said, yes, but it is hard to get there. I didn't understand it, but that's what he said. Then the man in the suit said, and you are being given a choice. Now I thought several things. One thought was, death is a dancer. That's a strange thought, but I'm trying to relate what I got at the time in its purest form. I got the impression at that point that I was not always going to be given a choice. I also got the impression that not everyone was given a choice. That this was just at this particular time, at this point. Then I also got the impression that this angel of death was not this being's permanent position. I felt that he was just on assignment, and that he wouldn't always be having this assignment. There were some other shadowy figures there, and I perceived that they were there to help me, because he said, do you wish to stay or do you wish to go? Now stay meant stay with them. Go meant go back. It's not what you would normally think. It was the reverse. Do you wish to stay or do you wish to go? And I knew it was wonderful there, and I wanted to stay. And I knew it was wonderful there, and I wanted to stay. And so I said, I want to stay. I can't remember his exact words, but he said, there are some things you have to know before you make up your mind. Then I was shown my mother, and she was crying and sobbing. And he said, now your mother will be destroyed, and she, in her destruction, will destroy those around her. And I'm sure he was talking about my father. I perceived that her life would just be over at that point. and in his love for her, his life would be over. But I said, "Oh, I want to stay," because I perceived that time was so fast there that it was nothing. They would be there so quickly, and they would understand when they got there. I also perceived another thing, that whatever way I chose was just right. There was absolutely no judgment or censure, but what I chose to do was the right thing to do. Then I was shown my husband. He was crying, and he was saying, "I never knew I loved her," which fits in with the way the marriage was at that time. I saw it would be very hard on him, but I said, "I want to stay," because I knew that in just a little while everybody would be there, and they'd all understand. Then he said, "Now your children will be all right, but they will not go as far as they could." But I still said, "I want to stay." I knew my children would be all right. Maybe not do as well as if I was there, but they'd still not go under. To stay there was still the most attractive choice. And then Death said, "Now you will have to stay close to your children." In other words, stay close to the edge. And I was told I would have to guide my children. I was just astonished, because that's not what I wanted. I wanted to go on over to this happy place and learn. I don't know how I knew I could learn there. It just came into my mind, and I knew. I hadn't seen it, but I knew the minute these people opened their mouths that this was a place that I wanted to be. I just knew that there were answers there. The answers, I suppose. There were studies, answers, growth. This was just instinctive, but I knew it was a place I wanted to stay. I sure didn't want to leave it and go back to these problems. I wanted to be there. But I reluctantly said at that point, well, if I have to stay close to the edge, I might as well go back. I've got these responsibilities, and I can handle it better from that side than I can by just trying to stay close to my children and influencing. So I said, okay, I'll go. And they all seemed quite pleased that I had decided that, even though there would have been no censure or judgment. I felt as if I was beginning to pull back, and I saw those other minor figures whispering, "She's going to go. She's going to go." I can't remember if they disappeared or if they went around the barrier. I think they went around the barrier. And I perceived that they had been there to help me cross over. But they weren't needed, so they disappeared. Then I started to pull back, as if I was leaving, and one of these men spoke up and said, "Before you go, there are some things we want you to know." Instantly, I was in another place. I wasn't in the tunnel anymore. It was kind of like a backyard, and there was a circle of people. I've tried, since then, to guess how many were in that circle of people sitting around in the chairs. I would guess maybe 8, 10, men and women. I perceived that they were my counsel, and I knew that every single person has a counsel that has a responsibility for each soul down here. They sort of reminded me of a country Sunday school group meeting out at the churchyard, maybe in the afternoon or something. I really couldn't see faces, but this one person sort of guided me. I remembered his bare arms and his rolled-up white shirt sleeves, very much like men would do at a warm Sunday, summer, Bible class type of thing. He took me over to a girl sitting under a tree, and she had black skin, colored skin. And he kind of plucked at her skin. She made the motions of pinching the skin of her forearm between her thumb and forefinger. And he said, "This is so unimportant. This skin. This is so unimportant. It's just a little covering. It is so unimportant. It's laughable." And then they both kind of laughed. And I was thinking, why is he telling me this? I know that. Then the next picture was, we were standing on a road, and there was at least one of my counselors with me. These 2 young men of East Indian visage were walking up the road, and they were there to show me myself. Now I was standing there, and all of a sudden next to me was myself. I saw a beautiful, very large, brilliant, opaque, shimmering sphere that I knew was myself. And I walked around, and I entered myself, this sphere of light. She illustrated with hand motions the act of entering the top of this sphere and proceeding downward through it to come out of the bottom. And I knew that when I came out, I would have all my answers. I would know myself, and I did. But when I went into the sphere, I descended. It was like being bathed in milky white, very comfortable, and I thought, any minute now I will reach the center. And soon I reached on through and emerged out the other side, sort of at a downward angle. I knew when I was in the center, but the center was exactly like the periphery. In other words, the center was exactly like the edges. Yet I perceived when I was in the edges and going through and in the center and coming out again. But the center was exactly like the periphery. They were just the same composition. When I came out, I knew myself. And I stood there, and I felt embarrassed. I felt naked because I knew myself, and I perceived my good and my bad, and I made no judgment upon myself. And I said, I've got to work on that. And they knew me, too. They knew me totally, and they smiled and nodded. And the nice thing was that there was no censure, absolutely none, no judgment. This is where I get hazy. I cannot recall which came next. I looked up, and the sky was suddenly darkened, and it was filled with stars. Some were huge, and some were medium, and some were tiny, and they were of varying brilliancies, but not one outshone the other. Even if there was a very tiny one next to a huge, brilliant one, you could still see each with equal clarity. And I knew the stars were souls. I said, well, where's mine? And someone said, there it is. I looked behind me, and there was my star. It had just risen off the horizon. And suddenly I was there, in the place where my star was. And I felt like I was interwoven into fabric. In that instant, I knew that we were all totally connected, and that no matter what happened, we could not be destroyed. Even if something came and ripped the fabric would hold. I knew that I could not be destroyed, nor could anyone else. That I was, as I am. Then I was next back in the meadow, standing at the roadside, and I looked out across this beautiful sunlit meadow, and there was a grove of trees. It was symbolic to me that there was a grove, but I perceived that within it was the tree of life. And suddenly, out of this grove of trees came this enormous ball of lightning. I just watched it as it flew across the meadow, and it struck me right here. She put her hand on her chest over her heart area. It was as though I had the breath knocked out of me. It was as if every ounce of everything was sucked out of me, and I was consumed. And what came into me was total, pure, unconditional love. It was so incredible. It went into every cell, and I could hardly get my breath. There wasn't anything I could give except love, because that was all I was composed of. It had taken over every atom. And then I started coming back. And someone shouted to me, and it may have been my counselor, "Stay married! You're meant to be married!" Which I have done. I came back, and I woke up and I saw the nurse in the intensive care unit leaning over me with the most concerned look on her face. She was watching me, and I thought, don't worry, I'm all right. I'm not going to die, and I won't go away again. I also thought, oh, you don't know where I've been. I didn't tell anybody for quite a few days. Later we discussed the possibility that Meg was dying, and maybe the nurse had either seen something on the machines or in the way she was acting. When Meg was zapped by the ball of lightning, that might have been an actual jolt to the body to restore life. She returned to her body immediately after being jolted. It could have affected her rather like the electric shocks administered to a patient after their heart stops. There will undoubtedly be debate about whether this incident really occurred, or whether it was a drug-related fantasy. But Meg has no such argument going on within her. She knows it was real. There is no doubt in her voice as she relates the incident. She knows, because it changed her life forever. As Meg said, maybe someone has to almost lose their life in order to find it. The rest of Meg's story. Meg became a good friend, and we remained in touch for more than 25 years after she told me this story. The NDE had such a profound effect on her life that she always told her husband that if she was dying, to allow her to go. She didn't want to be brought back. This happens with so many people who have experienced this phenomenon. They are no longer afraid of death. They have seen the other side and are anxious to go there again when the time comes. So years later, she developed cancer and was dying in the hospital. When her vital signs stopped, her husband became frantic and asked the medical personnel to resuscitate Meg. It brought her back, but she was very angry. She had once again crossed to the other side and did not want to return. She insisted that it not happen again. As she lay in the hospital, her pain increased, and there were no more access to her veins to administer pain medication. Then one night, a young male nurse entered her room and gently inserted an IV with pain medication in a small vein between her ring finger and the little finger. My daughter Julia, who was a nurse for 20 years, said that this is a very unlikely place to insert an IV. Meg was more comfortable for a few days until the IV had to be changed. She insisted that they bring the young male nurse in to replace it because he had done it so beautifully. The doctors insisted that there were no male nurses employed at that hospital. So who was the young man who had so gently relieved her pain? A spirit from the other side? Her guardian angel? Whoever he was definitely not from this physical earth. He had helped to make her passing more comfortable, because she died a few days later in her sleep before anyone could bring her back to this world again. I don't grieve for Meg because I know she is happy. She was one of the few who was able to see a glimpse of the other side, even if it was only for a few moments. What she saw was so beautiful, she knew she would never fear returning. Chapter 4. The Schools. I was to enter the fascinating spirit realm many times. This is the area that holds the most fear for humans, and the one that raises the eternal question, where will I go when I die? Everyone wonders what will happen to them, whether there will be total oblivion or continuation of the personality. Even the most religious still harbor their uncertainties. I do not have all the answers, but I believe I can help through the information I have received in my regression research. Even the regressed somnambulist cannot tell you what they do not know. But when you obtain the same descriptions from many different people, you have to assume it has validity. Maybe it rings true because the majority would truly like to believe the afterlife is a place of peace and contentment. I personally find the idea of staying in the ground until Resurrection Day or Judgment Day totally repulsive. Also, the idea of floating around on a cloud, playing a harp for eternity, is not my vision of heaven. I think it would get boring quickly. Maybe I find this concept of the schools attractive because of my insatiable curiosity and my constant quest for knowledge.